Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're gonna do a photography shoot off between me and Alex. He's gonna be using my A7R3. I'm gonna be using an A5000, which is Sony's cheapest mirrorless camera. And Sydney's gonna be modeling for us. We're here today to prove that gear does not matter. So let's get into it. All right, so that didn't work. We had this big plan of recording this video and comparing the two, and we just got a bunch of great B-roll segments. We did not get any information sent whatsoever, so I kind of trashed the video a little bit, but then I brought it back and was like, okay, well, we're just gonna sit down and talk about it. So I was using the A5000 and Alex was using the A7R3. Now, my camera goes for about $200 right now, and the lens is about $150, $200 as well. The A7R3 went for $3,600 whenever it was brand new, and the lens he was using was a $1,600 lens, so he definitely had the advantage over me.
Advantage.
Yeah. But what we were testing was, it's all about skill, and your camera doesn't really matter. That if you're a skilled photographer, you can make whatever you need to out of the best or worst situation. And so that's what we were really testing, because I've been doing this for several years and he's been doing this for less than a year. And so it was really kind of like a skills test, but also like your gear doesn't really matter at all. There are limitations to certain gear, but you can make anything work. So as we were going into this, what were kind of like your thoughts and your ideas of what was going to happen?
So, like, at first I really didn't know what exactly I was getting into. I was just like, okay, yeah, we're going to do this thing. We're going to figure it out. And then whenever I got your camera, I was like, okay, well, this is similar to my camera because I shoot with an A7 II, and I've been shooting with that for a few months now. But then whenever, like, I actually got my hands on it, I was like, oh no. There's just so many more things available to you on that camera that aren't on mine. Mm-hmm. And so looking through it, I was getting very worried about, like, am I going to be able to use this camera? Am I going to know where everything is? You know, things like that. But then whenever you were like, well, you're going to pick your location, I was like, oh crap, because this is my first time ever shooting with a model. Never shot with one before. So it was like crunch time, like immediately. And so then I was struggling with thinking like, okay, how am I going to use this camera? But okay, well, where am I going to put her? How am I going to put her? And then you're like, let's go. And I'm like, crap.
And so that's one of those things is, you know, you can have an extremely nice camera and all these other things, but if you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter at all. And so we'll see, and we're gonna talk about the locations that we chose, because we had one centralized location, but I was like, okay, go pick where you wanna shoot with her in front of, and pick this and pick that. And so because he was new to this, all of those things play a part in your actual photography. Photography is not just the camera that you have. And so we're gonna walk through these things and just kind of show the differences of what was going through my mind while I was shooting this and what was going through his mind, and our struggles and our successes going along with this. I also wanna say that he was shooting with a 35 1.4 Zeiss lens, and I was shooting with a 16mm 2.8 on a crop sensor body, so it was 24mm. So close to similar focal range. I didn't want to use just the kit lens that came with the camera because that would have really limited me. Maybe I should have, but we're gonna take a look at some B-roll from this first location, and then we'll jump into talking about it.
So the first location, I was kind of looking for not necessarily backgrounds, but like lighting. Lighting was big for me because I wanted to make sure that I was being like properly exposed. So I saw the tree, and I was like, oh, well, it's super well lit. I'll just go there. But I chose the wrong tree. So the tree that I chose, it wasn't very flattering for her, and it kind of made her stick out like a sore thumb just because that tree was super awkward. The lighting was cool, and I got some cool stuff on her face. It was kind of what I was going for, but the tree just made it look way out of whack, and there were better options that I just didn't think about, but I was scrambling, and I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? Boom, straight to that tree. And then I didn't move. So looking back, after I took the first few photos, I should have been like, I hate this, let's move. But that thought never ran through my mind because I just assumed like, well, I picked it, we're here. So we're going to make the best out of it whenever I just could have moved.
And with my shot that I did some really close-up stuff, one of her face, and it was real kind of distorted. So shooting with 24 millimeters, you're going to get that distortion. And so I played into that. And I did one really close to her face with the tree coming down. And then I also kind of had one of her a little bit stretched out and elongated her. And so with the distortion, it made a really cool effect on her. And so I knew those things about the lens, and I was able to compensate for those things and make a really good composition. The one of her kind of stretched out was really one of my favorites from the shoot, just because of the way that it all flowed together.
Okay, so I had some outside help on the second location. Johnny actually picked it because I think he saw me struggle a little bit with the first location. So we were out in the field, and it was super well lit. Everything was perfect. There was no busyness in the photo, which, as my previous one, had a lot of busy stuff in it, which was great. But that's whenever I learned and kind of realized that interacting with a model is actually like mega important. They are just as important as you are, believe it or not. They are absolutely incredible at their craft and what they do, and you have to utilize them and their knowledge along with your own, which I did not do. So I did not give her any instructions whatsoever, and she was just kind of out there doing her own thing, which was great, and she did a fantastic job. But looking back, I now realize I should have like given her some instruction. I kind of moved her along, and then also shown her what I was taking. That way she could reflect back on that and be like, oh, well, I don't like where my arm is. I'm going to move it a little bit. Or, you know, subtle things like that I just didn't know, didn't do. So I had a super sick camera, a super sick lens, and no knowledge in how to use not only that, but the interaction with the model. And that's key.
Yeah, and it is. And I think in that location it was good. It was kind of sparse. Like there wasn't really, like the background was interesting enough, but there was something more needed to happen. So that's why I did the thing with her throwing her coat at me, especially with the lens that I was using. I wanted to create depth to the photo. There was nothing in our foreground whatsoever. And so just to throw a model up there, you've got a beautiful background, but then there's nothing in the foreground and it's just her. And so there's something interesting that you have to do. And so I was able to really work with that and able to make that location work a lot better for me because I was able to add depth into that photo. Whereas with you, it was a little bit more, and you weren't even thinking about that because you were just trying to get the model to do what you were wanting to do.
Right.
But then you weren't communicating, and so it was a little bit difficult. So whereas and what was the hardest thing with the one where she was flicking her coat at me was the fact that the lens that I was using is terrible autofocus. I mean, literally the worst autofocus I've ever seen in my entire life. And so I had to do manual autofocus that whole time. So that was one of my biggest struggles because I heavily, heavily rely on my autofocus on my R3, and not having that, it's kind of like a crutch, but also it just kind of makes you appreciate what this autofocus system can do. So now for this third and final location, I really wanted to have something in the foreground and really wanted to have that texture behind her along with the beautiful scenery behind her as well. So we shot in these weeds. And this was really where posing shone through, because the background was really interesting, but because it was busy, you had to make your model stand out somehow. And I was able to do that with the posing. And really with this camera, it was just kind of awkward for me because it was my first camera and I haven't used it in a couple years. And so with having all of my modes and dials on my R3, I'm able to just switch settings, boom, go. And with this one, I was really trying to pay attention to the settings, really trying to get the focus right. And I just kept fumbling with all of these dials. So where, yes, I can get great photos with the A5000, there are certain things about your gear that do help you out. There are certain things that just make your life easier, but it's not necessarily things that you want to go out and spend $3,000 just to have an extra dial on your camera. They're not necessarily necessary, but they do help you out a lot. And so that was my biggest thing with this location that I was really struggling with, is I kept hitting the wrong button and trying to figure out how to get my ISO to change, how to change my aperture, because there was only one dial on it. But I really liked this location, and I liked using that lens and making her look long and being able to get these long photos, because whenever you work with a model, you want to elongate her. You don't want to make them look short and stubby. And so using that super wide lens really helped me out in order to do that. Whereas with my 35, I probably would have shot it a little bit different. I still would have elongated her, but it would have just been a different vibe to the photo. And so it still worked out really well based on the gear that I was using.
And for me, I actually really, really loved the location. Again, second or third location, I didn't actually pick either, which worked out great because it was so busy everywhere, and I honestly wouldn't have known where to go. But once we got there, my biggest struggle was that I don't typically use a 35 whenever I use my camera. So I didn't really understand where to be standing in order to get not only like a good photo of her, but like everything in the background and like actually tell a story with the photo. But one thing that I was proud of about the final location was I took in account of everything that I'd been taught while we were going along. So this was a big learning experience for me during not only everything that I'd learned before, but during a huge learning experience, because I got a lot of feedback from Johnny, I got a lot of feedback from Sydney, got a lot of feedback from everybody when we were there. So the last one, I was interacting with her a little bit more. It's still not enough, but doing a little bit more than what I had been previously, and just kind of going for it, taking a risk on certain things. And I was really proud of the last photo. It kind of embodied everything that I had learned that day into that last one. So the last one is definitely my favorite, but still so much further to go as far as just like learning everything. And that's really where the gear does not matter if you can't use it. And even if you have great gear and you can use it, that still doesn't matter if you can't talk to the model, if you can't interact with the model, if you can't compose things correctly and just get everybody who is involved actually involved. That's the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the biggest things that helps, especially when shooting with a model, is showing them the photos. I think a lot of photographers don't show their models the photos because they're like, oh, well, it's raw, it's not edited, I'm going to do this and this and this. But the reason why I show the models their photos while I'm shooting with them, especially if it's a collaboration and I'm doing a free shoot, is because they need to see what they look like in order to fix and adjust. Like, this is a two-way street. Like, I have to help her and she has to help me. And so if I don't show her the pictures and then she's like, oh, well, in this picture my hair was out of place, or in this picture I didn't like my hand placement, or those kinds of things, and whereas I thought they were great, she doesn't end up posting them, which literally does nothing for me. And so It's a collaboration, it's a work together. You have to show, you don't have to, but it's good to show your models your photos while you're shooting in order for them to give you feedback and you to give them feedback on, even if it's just as simple as, hey, okay, you're doing your duck arm, let's not do your duck arm, let's flip it and get your shoulder down and give you more curves, and then you can take a picture of them with the duck arm, show them how awful it looks, and then flip up their pose and teach them as well what's going on. And so it's this big collaboration effect, but you have to be willing to kind of humble yourself and show them like, hey, this isn't edited or anything, but I'm focus on you and what you look like, and let's work together and make this really good. So whenever we're doing these, it really is a huge collaboration with us and the model, and that's really the biggest thing is, you know, I could have taken these pictures on my iPhone and they still would have turned out great because of my interactions with the model and the way that we were both working together.
And your positive reinforcement with her. Like, that was something that I didn't realize either is, you know, after every shot, you know, he was building her up, you know, making her comfortable and everything like that, which is, like, huge. You have to do that because it's just, if you don't, then it's just like, yep, did good. Like, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work as good.
Yeah, and so with all of that, it's really just to say that your gear really doesn't matter at all. It's all about how you interact with your environment around you. It's how you interact with your model. It's what your eye sees. It's how you work with the gear that you are given in order to make the best out of any situation. Because, you know, I could have, if I wanted to elongate her more, I could have taken my camera and thrown on a 17-28 and really stretched her out, or if I wanted some macro shots, I could have done all of that, but I didn't have those things with me. All I had was this 24mm lens, and so I had to work with what I had. You know, this camera didn't have a massive dynamic range, so I couldn't always expose for her face and the highlights in the sky and the shadows and all of this other stuff, so I had to pick what I wanted the picture to be focused on. And so all of those things, while yes, there are limitations with certain gear, if you can always learn your gear, learn how it can function, how it can't function, and then you can make the best out of that until you're able to grow your skill and go up to that next level of gear where you actually do need those other things. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like and then hit that subscribe button down below. There's going to be a lot more content coming on this channel. Going to be doing some gear reviews. I've got new equipment coming in, more behind the scenes of our photo shoots and how we interact with models and how we come up with our creative ideas, as well as editing techniques, and then my story time, my vlogs of how I am starting this business from the ground up and growing it to be something awesome. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.